Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I would ask if everybody could take a seat. Thank you. My name is Charles Taylor, and I serve as Executive Director for the Mississippi State Conference, NAACP. And I want to thank y'all for coming out tonight, especially with all that's happening in Jackson and the inclement of the weather. So really appreciate you. I want you to give yourselves a round of applause. I'm excited about us having a fruitful discussion about the Jackson water system once again. So I want to thank you and also welcome you to New Hope Baptist Church. You know, this is my church, so I'm always proud when we can have a meeting at New Hope Baptist Church. It's a beautiful sanctuary, and we have an amazing pastor, Dr. Jerry Young. And with that, it would be my honor and pleasure if I would ask Dr. Jerry Young to welcome us to New Hope Baptist Church. Thank you and God bless.
I am delighted and privileged to be here tonight, and I'm extremely pleased to be able to host this meeting to deal with some of the issues that are prevalent in our community. And I'm so thankful that Congressman Thompson and NAACP Executive Director, and what else you got, Derek? I mean, all the titles that Derek has. Both of these men are good friends of ours, and they asked if we would host this meeting, and of course, without question, we agreed to do so because we want to be sure that when the record is called, everybody would understand that all of us are in this together. I mean, this is not black and white, blue and green. Some folk would want to make it that, and some folk want to make it Democrat and Republican. But the truth of the matter is, if you're thinking straight, this is about us's. And so we are delighted and privileged that you're here. Please allow us to know if we can make your stay here comfortable. And I am so thankful to have Congressman Thompson representing us, and Derek representing us. I'm just so thankful. He represents the people. And I say this without any fear of contradiction. We have a lot of serious problems in our city, in our state, and in our nation. But you can quote me on this one. I am convinced that there are no problems too big to solve, only people too small to solve them. And that, my friend, is a fact. I am praying that God would give us some bigger people, because the bigger you are, the smaller the ego is. And the smaller you are, the bigger the ego is. I'm praying that God will give us some small people who can help us solve these huge problems in our community. Thank God once again for Congressman Thompson, Derek Johnson. Derek Jackson is my man who makes sure I get paid at the national convention level, and Brother Charles, who gives leadership here in the state. How we thank God for them. Would you all receive them tonight as they come? Y'all come. And,
Good evening. Let me thank Dr. Young for allowing us to come to New Hope tonight. This is a second installment of a town hall conversation about a number of issues facing Jackson, Mississippi, and the state as a whole. We have been involved in a number of efforts around the state. Let me thank the New Hope family for its leadership in the water crisis with distribution of resources. But let me thank the entire Jackson community for rallying around the tornado victims in the Delta. Thank you so much. We've seen your generosity. We've seen you in helping individuals in that time of need. And so it's been a joy. I've been in several of the counties today. I talked to Mr. Brown driving back from one of them today because it's important that when you're down, the people who show up, those are your real friends. And so I thank you for that. But more importantly, we're here tonight to further a conversation about what's happening in the community. There are a lot of things going on, good and bad, but we need to have a conversation about what's the plan. And when we met before, we talked about the different plans that we had underway. We heard a lot of frustration from people in this community, and somehow the legislature has decided to somehow start picking on Jackson, and over and above the fact that our people pay taxes, they live in the community, and wouldn't it be wonderful if our state legislature would actually come to New Hope and say, look, we're planning legislation for you all, but we want to hear from you before we drop the bill. And so ultimately, that was not the case. The majority of the people who introduce legislation that impacts this area, they don't live here. And that's unfortunate because if they had, I'm convinced they would have gotten a different response to the legislation ultimately introduced and passed. So that brings us here to have a conversation. I have an opinion, the other people on the panel have, but we want to hear from you also. The only thing, there's no discussion off limits. So we had intended to have it about the legislation, and we will. But I guarantee you, before we leave here tonight, somebody's going to talk about garbage. And I think you should. It's a problem. We have the person managing the water crisis for the city of Jackson here with us tonight, Mr. Hennepin. So we got enough people who can answer some of the questions. But now we're in New Hope Missionary Baptist Church. So I understand frustrations, but we don't need any 4 or 5 letter words in your frustration. So help us out. We can read body language, but we just don't need to hear it. Is that all right, Pastor? Okay, thank you. Well, let me thank everybody for being here, and I look forward to the discussion. Let me introduce Derrick Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP, the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the country, who is a Tougaloo College graduate and a Jackson, Mississippi citizen. So he clearly understands what we are up against because he lives it too. But he brings extraordinary resources to the table that will be an asset to whatever solution we craft. So I'll introduce Derrick for his opening statement.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming out once again. You know, the last time we met, it was talking about how we got to the place where the water system had failed. And the Congressman and I, we wanted to have a meeting to talk about solutions, not about problems, because oftentimes we come together, we are experts in identifying and talk about problems. But at that meeting, we talked about solutions, and thankful to the congressman, he delivered over $600 million to address the problem. So this is about a journey. And one of the things that I learned, oftentimes we engage into a policy fight or a fight, and we think just because you win one battle is over. And oftentimes that could be the beginning of the battle, the middle, but it's never over, particularly when you're talking about a state like Mississippi who lives off of federal dollars. We are a net surplus state. For every $1 we send in taxes, we receive over $2.50 back. And this state, what they have done is use the demographics, whether it's poverty, race, or otherwise, to capture the money from the federal government, but they redirect it out of the areas of need or the areas where the demographics were collected from, and that's how we ended up in this space. For over 25 years, the state of Mississippi have received funds under the Clean Water Act. Only 3 of those 25 years did they allocate funds for the oldest water infrastructure in the state, that's the city of Jackson's infrastructure. Now the response that we've heard is, well, Jackson only applied for the money 3 years, but if you write the criteria where you automatically preclude the city from qualifying, why should the city waste their time? What would they do? They'll say for population, for jurisdictions under said population, 4,000. Well, there's over 150,000 people in the city, therefore, before anything is done, Jackson not qualified. Or they get the money and put the amount that they're going to give out so low that it's a rounding error. It won't fix a pipe down a street. They intentionally did that to starve the system and the city of resources for the infrastructure. I believe, Congressman said we all got opinions, right? I believe as a result of the 1997 meritorious elections where we elected the first black mayor for the city of Jackson. And that's when we begin to see this accelerate. For Mississippi, as we all know, race is a common denominator when the state operates against its own interest. And we have yet to mature as a state to recognize that all of the citizens of this state are entitled to dignity, respect, and the allocation of the tax dollars that we send up, not just some of them. And so that is the journey how we've gotten here. So as we begin to talk about where we are and next steps, I promise you we're going to be talking about solutions and not just about problems, because it frustrates me to no end when individuals get elected and all they do is complain about what some other elected official's not doing, and they're yet to present a solution. We have city council people who live in this city like that. So at some point, whether we're talking about water or garbage, we have to begin to hold people to task. You know, Aaron Henry, when he was state president, and some of y'all knew him much better than me, and Aaron Henry was a complicated personality. You all know that, right? He said, when white folks are acting like white folks, we gotta treat them like white folks. But when black folks acting like white folks, you gotta treat them like white folks too. What am I saying? In a Mississippi racialized context, that an individual of his era and his time recognized that many in the white community demeaned and treated black people in the worst possible way, not only physically, but through public policy. And when we elect African Americans who sit in seats, and they treat us through public policy the same way, we must treat them the same way. And not make a distinction, because at the end of the day, representative government requires the person who's holding the seat to represent the constituents who put him or her in office, regardless of their race. And so we are confronted with this duality of a problem. A state that is attacking the city of Jackson, and some of our elected officials from the city of Jackson not holding up their responsibility to represent the citizens. And so we want to talk about solutions in this process. I am proud to be a resident of the city of Jackson, to learn and develop as a professional in the city of Jackson, to grow through the NAACP in the state of Mississippi. Our state conference president, Reverend James, is sitting here. Now, you know, NAACP, we have the volunteer side. I was the volunteer side, the state president, that's Reverend James, and then you have the paid side. And so we are pleased that we grew big enough to pay Charles to be on the paid side. So Charles is executive director, but Reverend James is our state president. But I'm also pleased to have our general counsel, Jeanette Luard, if you would please set up. Who's our general counsel, Joe Schottenfeld from Associate General Counsel in the office. You can set up, Joe, don't be shy. But also the person who's really been staffing this process, Abray Connor, who's the director of our economic and climate justice. I'm gonna let her open it up and then we're gonna come back around. Abray?
Yes. Thank you so much. So as President Johnson has stated and as Congressman Benny Thompson has stated, we're here today to talk about solutions. And so what you all have in front of you is a one-pager document that, number one, will allow for you to be able to follow along with the changes that have happened in Jackson. What we've continued to hear is that there are so many changes as it relates to the water system that is important for us to be able to document and actually ensure that the education around the spending, around what's happening with the water, around what happens when there is inclement weather, that information is available to you all. And so in addition to your one-pager kind of going through the spending, the $600 million that has made it to Jackson, we go through what does this mean for the immediate crisis. So we know that, for example, to fix Jackson's water system is going to cost billions of dollars for that to happen. So this is a great step in the right direction, but we're going to have to continue to push to ensure that Jackson gets all the money and the resources that it needs to be able to rebuild. On the back of your one-pager, we also go through the legislative efforts that have been directed particularly at Jackson, at taking over local control of the resources that Jackson has fought so hard to be able to have. We go through some of the key restrictions. One of the things that's really important, and I know that President Johnson will outline later, is that these bills right now are still sitting at the governor's desk. So there's still an opportunity to ensure that your voices continue to be heard as it relates to these bills that are targeted at taking away the resources of Jackson residents. There's also a QR code. And that code, if you actually put your phone up to the QR code, and I think we're actually gonna try to put on the screen the Community Bill of Rights, that we feel like is an opportunity to ensure that not only are we calling for there being safe drinking water, but also that we're outlining the needs that we've continued to hear over and over again from residents about what's actually going to be needed for long-term solutions. These kinds of points are helpful when we're having conversations with federal policymakers, with state policymakers, in a number of different spaces, so that people fully understand what's actually needed in order to have a safe drinking water system. So, for now, if you click on where it says scan me, use your phone, use the camera, and then it'll give you a little hyperlink. And you should see on there a Community Bill of Rights. So I'm gonna read them out. The first one is that the city of Jackson must have a state-of-the-art water system. The second one is that the state must actually be held accountable for discriminating against residents here in Jackson. So you can keep going. 2 more slides. The third one is that Justice 40 funding must go to the city of Jackson. So we've talked a lot about Justice 40 in the past, in our past town halls, but just as a reminder, Justice 40 is a promise by the Biden administration that historically excluded communities like Jackson, Mississippi, have to be prioritized in funding that's actually coming through the state to cities like Jackson, Mississippi. But what we've seen over and over again, as President Johnson and Congressman Benny Thompson outlined, is that places like Jackson have not been prioritized. So in this Bill of Rights, it's calling that Justice 40 funding has to come to the city of Jackson. That community voices must be a part of any long-term, medium, and short-term planning for the water crisis. Next, that Mississippi state agencies must have accountability and more oversight for environmental decisions that harm Black communities. I'm gonna pause here as well. So one of the things that we continue to see is that you have agencies like the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality and other agencies who are making decisions that impact people's everyday lives. And they're making decisions around allocations of money. That money is not coming here. So there needs to be more oversight over the decisions that they're making to make sure that money actually gets here to Jackson, Mississippi. Next, community members must be prioritized with jobs, contracts, and other economic benefits in fixing the water system. So as you all know, we're at a place now where there's going to likely there may be jobs relating to fixing the water system. And we want to make sure that residents here are a part of those conversations and those jobs aren't going to people who don't live in Jackson, Mississippi. Next, that Black business owners and other workers must have access to resources to access jobs for the water system. Next, that access to free water testing and home assessments. And then next, any changes to water rates must be examined with a lens of equity and justice. And we're seeing that actually play out right now in the state legislature. There's already been, Ted is here in the city of Jackson. Those kind of efforts were already underway, but as we've seen with the state legislature, they're trying to take away those efforts. So that's why that's in the Community Bill of Rights. And lastly, that the governor must be held accountable for intentionally misinforming the public about the harm that he has caused in Jackson.
So the last time we was here, we said the purpose of the meeting, it was directly about the water. Said that every resident should have safe, clean drinking water, that the assets should be under local control, not privatized, and to prevent the state from taking it over. Right? So we achieved that up to this point. And in response to what we have done, both with filing a Title VI complaint against the state for discriminating against the residents of the city of Jackson, and after Congressman Thompson was able to get in the omnibus bill the appropriation necessary to start the process to fix the system, the state's response has been through this legislative session to adopt a series of policies that is directed at the city of Jackson to undermine not only our vote, but our ability to self-govern. So I'm gonna go through a few of those things quickly so we all understand where we are in terms of this fight, because the fight is ongoing, it's back and forward. And then talk about the next steps. Under HB 1020, they are set to create a separate court system where the Chief Justice can appoint judges and prosecutors to oversee matters in Jackson, despite Jackson having elected judges. The law creates displacement of currently elected judges and silences the voice of Black residents who elected judges to oversee their matters. This becomes important here. This is about vote dilution. And as we have retired Judge Tommy Green, some of y'all worked in her campaign, when we finally got representation on the court, we cannot allow them simply to take it, plus it is against state constitution to do so. And to supersede the authority of the voters who elected a district attorney and put someone appointed by the Attorney General also supersede the authority of the Constitution and its vote dilution at its best. And another version of the same bill is coming out of the Senate. They want to expand the Capital Improvement District. It would allow the Department of Public Safety to make arrests for any violation of law on the grounds of or within the properties of the CCID. Now this becomes interesting because what they wanted to do was capture the areas of Belhaven and Eastover and Fondren. Y'all understand what that means, right? To create an overlapping police force. This is also problematic because it potentially impacts constitutional rights, including the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause, and all type of other violations that they would impose. Now, unfortunately, this nation has a crime problem. It's not Jackson has a crime problem. This nation has a crime problem. And if you want to solve the crime problem, you sit with leaders to come up with a solution to address the problem. The meth epidemic in this nation, in this state, in Rankin County, far supersedes the crack epidemic when we talked about it in the 90s, but they don't publicize it. And so we cannot accept them imposing a police force controlled by the Department of Public Safety when we elect officials that we must hold accountable, because let's be clear, JPD leaves a lot to be desired. But as we should not concede our authority to allow an authority to come in and cause more harm. House Bill 698 prohibits municipalities for charging for water based on the values of a customer's home. Municipalities currently using flat rate billing do not have to use. So what does this mean? Some of y'all heard this on the news. When I moved into my house, I didn't pay a water bill for 2 years. I paid trash and sewage. I didn't pay water because the prior occupant of my house knew somebody and wasn't being charged. A large number of the businesses in this city are not paying water bills. Some of you don't tell on yourself ain't paid no water bill. One of the reasons why the system failed is because we don't have an equitable way to ensure that everyone pay their fair amount. And if you do it based on property value, it's a more equitable way to consider how individuals who are under-resourced can pay their fair share compared to individuals who are highly resourced. So it levels the field, but what the state is doing in this bill, it takes that ability for the city to even consider another way to levy citizens for the use of water. And I'm not saying that is the right way or the wrong way. I'm saying that home rule self-governance is the key here. Also, they adopted a bill 1168, which restricts the city of Jackson from utilizing the 1% sales tax that we voted to levy against ourselves to pave the roads, and to restrict the use of those monies only towards the water system. Well, problem one, we had a member of our delegation some years ago to cut a deal that there would be a special commission to oversee our tax money. Now remember what I said before, policy makers, whether they're black or white, sometimes don't represent our best interests. I'm not gonna call no names. So that commission should have never been put in place in the first place. And then secondly, now they want to restrict how we can spend our tax dollars. And we know that we need more money for road resurfacing. All right? Then when you go to 1020 again, It authorized the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court to be appointed 15 days after passage of the act, 4 temporary special circuit court judges for the 7th Circuit District of High County. The bill also creates a CCI inferior court that has equivalent jurisdiction as a municipal court. This is why this is a problem. 15 days after signage, the Chief Justice can appoint. Now, those judges that you elected no longer have the same ability to carry out their duties because cases could get directed to those judges. We don't know what those judges' value propositions would be when they get to the court. Who would they be? Would they be citizens of the Jackson? Do they hold the same value systems that we have? And we know what the answer is to that. They will also, in terms of when someone is found in violation, they have the authority to send them to the Department of Correction. Y'all understand what that means, right? So you can be charged with a simple violation and get sent to punishment. Now, that's an extreme, but that's the authority that they will have. The State Attorney General will designate 2 attorneys to prosecute any cause of action within the jurisdiction of that district. So no longer would the district attorney, it'll be 2 people appointed by the State Attorney General. So essentially, we could have a Rankin County inside of the city of Jackson. And I can go on. What's the response to this? As soon as the governor signed any and all these bills, we will be filing a lawsuit that same day. Because if we allow the erosion of our rights in the treatment of be treated as second-class citizens, 2023 will be no difference than 1950 for black people in the state of Mississippi. And what's most unique about what they're seeking to do, they're only imposing this on the city of Jackson. No other jurisdiction in the state of Mississippi will have this type of oversight in taking of local authority. That is a direct violation of equal protection. And so as we talk about the problem, the solution is we will be in court the very same or next day. That's absolutely essential. When we talked about the failing of the water system, the first thing we did was file the Title VI complaint, which opened the door, and Congressman Thompson got the money. We can no longer have these gatherings and we're not talking about solutions to the problem. The Bill of Rights signed on allow for our voices to be heard, and that's why we wanted to convene this conversation tonight. And we have joining us Ms. Nashambi Lambright, straight from the airport. Nashambi, you want to have a few words?
Evening, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. I did have a previously scheduled engagement in Atlanta before this was scheduled, but once I found out that we were having this town hall, I quickly changed my plans to get back here early so I could be a part of this conversation, because you have to work at home first before you go other places. But that conversation in Atlanta was really good. We were convening with a group of women from other cities that are facing similar things, Baton Rouge, Memphis, that are all facing attacks on their black leadership. And one of the questions that we asked, why is there this attack on black leadership in our cities with majority black populations? and what can we do as citizens to address this? And yes, we do have to hold our elected officials accountable. Yes, our elected officials do need tools and resources to strengthen their ability to govern. But we have to acknowledge that there is an attack on black leadership nationwide, and especially in the South. And so as the Jackson branch and as the state conference and as the national NAACP, as I'm putting on my friend's agenda, we are definitely defending black leadership nationwide and trusting in black leadership nationwide and standing by black leadership. As the Jackson branch, we want to make sure that our city officials are supported, that we get the resources that we need to make sure that we have clean water in Jackson, that we see this whole rebuilding of our water infrastructure through to the end, and that while our water system is being revamped, that we have water filters for every family, and that we are understanding what the process is to make sure that each family has access to clean water, regardless of how long that process takes. Derek talked a little bit about the Capital Police bill. We've been working with our coalition, Jackson Undivided, to fight this legislation. As you all know, Capitol Police have been horrific for the black community in Jackson. Capitol Police have killed more people or have been responsible for more deaths in the past year than JPD has over the past several years. And that's not healthy for our community. They have no accountability mechanisms. They report directly to the Director of Public Safety, the Commissioner of Public Safety, who reports directly to the governor. And these folks have not been accountable to community or to the families of the victims who are still waiting for answers, still waiting for justice for the loss of their loved ones. So we don't want Capitol Police in our communities. It looks like, absolutely. So it looks like we're gonna get them anyway. So in response, as usual, we rise to the occasion and we hold them accountable. We are, I think, on our third community meeting. I think one was postponed last night. That was at the Masonic Lodge. And so we're gonna have one Monday night at Sykes Gym and one Tuesday night in each ward to make sure that citizens understand what Derek explained about the components of the Capitol Police bill and what it means for each community and what we can do now. We're going to talk about basic knowing your rights and how we can keep our young folks safe in our communities and how we can document these incidents of abuse when we see them in our communities and report them to the state, to our elected officials, to the Department of Justice when we need to. So we're not gonna stop fighting. We don't care what they bring to us. We are not gonna stop fighting. And so we just need, for all citizens of Jackson to know that we know that it's tough right now, but we're still working. We need for y'all to just keep on working with us. And just quickly, we also continue to have the City of Jackson Public Safety Commission, who has just started the Office of Trauma Recovery and Violence Prevention. We will be hiring the executive director, the first executive director for that office, and that office is going to be a very strong office to help support some of the great anti-violence work that's going on in Jackson. And this work is going to address violence from a community safety lens that doesn't look at more jails and locking folks up. Like, we know that that doesn't work. We've always known that it's not evidence-based. So we're looking at evidence-based programs to keep communities safe. So stay tuned for more information about that office and the work that office is going to do. I'm very excited about the direction that Jackson is going in now and some of the work that we've already started. A lot of this state interference is undermining some of the work that we've started, but we're not going to stop. We're going to keep on pushing, and we just need your support. Thank you.
Well, this is an opportunity for those of you who've joined us this evening to ask questions or whatever, but it's a town hall meeting, and we encourage you that if you've heard something that you need further information on, that's fine. If something you didn't hear that you want to share with the group, this is an opportunity. The one thing I do want to say is the water solution is a long-term problem. As Derek said, it's an expensive proposition. You can't neglect a system this long and fix it overnight. So you have to be patient with us. We're moving forward, trying to get it right. And in the midst of trying to get it right, the legislature is messing with it too. At first, as you know, they had the audacity to talk about, well, we want to take the system, but we're going to let you fix it before we take it. Well, I mean, you know, we might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. So those are the kinds of things that we have to push back on. When you say, you can't give me another example of a system that you're trying to take, like you're doing Jackson. You can't give me another police department that you're trying to create like you're doing in Jackson. You can't give me another airport like you're trying to take in Jackson. So it looks like Jackson is being singled out. And it only started, as Derek said, when the politics of Jackson started going in a different direction. And I'm convinced, and a lot of other people, that that's solely the only reason that Jackson is being treated differently than all other communities in the state of Mississippi. And that's why we have to push back. With every fiber in our body, we have been talking to various people around the country who identify with this issue and are prepared to join us in the effort to push back. So we won't be by ourselves in this fight. But we need to hear voices saying, I live in Jackson, I don't like what's taking place. This judicial system they're trying to create is bad news. Our Constitution says that we are supposed to elect our judges. And now all of a sudden, in Jackson, we're going to appoint the judges. And so you're passing a law that's in direct conflict with your own Constitution. And so, as Reverend Jesse Jackson used to say, every time we learn the game, they change the rules. So in this instance, they're just changing the rules because they are in charge. But you know, we are a nation of laws. You're going to have to defend bad law when you pass them. And I'm convinced that somewhere there's a court of law that will uphold the rule of law. And so with the NAACP's effort, we go in that direction. Now, if people wanted to help us, the first thing they should have done was to come talk to us. It said, Reverend Young, can we host a meeting at New Hope to kind of talk about the crime issue? If the City of Jackson Police Department needs additional resources, you give them the resources. You don't create a new police department. So there are just a lot of things that don't quite match up. And then when people say, oh, we were just trying to help y'all. Give me a break. If you're trying to help, talk to us. And then we can work it out. But in the absence of a conversation, I think you're doing it for the wrong reason. People in Jackson pay taxes. People live here. What better resource for crafting a solution than talk to the people who live here? And they've not done that. And that's why we're here tonight, to try to at least let you know what the future may hold for it. And I would, once we get in court, the novel ideas that they'll come with as to why these bills were created, I can only imagine what they will say. But nonetheless, we're here tonight. If there are some conversations you want to talk about, if you don't want to talk about the garbage, I will. Let me tell you, if the person who is low bidder by millions of dollars, who picked the garbage up for months without getting paid, I'm trying to figure out, yeah, what's the problem? Is the company that I hear that's in competition picks up garbage all over the country. But they lost the bid to a different company that was $12 million less than the company you're trying to give it to. So now I want you to understand, we already struggling as a city, and you want to give a $12 million contract, more than money you have, to a company. Now, that's why the whole conversation concerns me, because you need the money in Jackson to address some of your other problems. And so I'm concerned because I'm getting calls as a congressman for this area from people. Everybody can't take their garbage to Metro Center or Jackson Mall. And so all I'm saying to our city leaders is you have a legitimate bid on the table. You have a company that's performed. You have a company that hired local people to do the job. I think the citizens of this community owe the benefit of getting their garbage picked up on the person or the company that did the job for the city. So, I mean, that's my garbage comment, but it's kind of, people are calling the office, and, those are the responses we're giving them. Yes, ma'am.
I understand what you're saying, and many people are saying the same thing, because we do not want to have this disruption in pickup. but some are also concerned about protocol and the way that this whole conflict came about and how it's being handled. So I think that the tension between the mayor and the council needs to be looked at. And when we look at the behavior of some of the council members, it's not stellar.
Well, I think President Johnson said it best. We're trying to craft some solutions as we discuss things tonight. And I think what I hear from a lot of the calls I get to my office is look like to me they ought to be able to get together and work it out and get the garbage picked up. And so my recommendation is exactly that. We don't need this interruption. It's unnecessary, and obviously, you know, it says if we can't get the garbage picked up, then you start looking at real complicated issues, and the question comes: can we get anything done? And so, you know, I want the council, like all of you here tonight, to just work it out. You shouldn't have to go to court to settle a difference like this. I mean, it just should not be, but it is. And I guess the sense of what I hear from everybody is they ought to be able to work it out. And I think you agree too, right there?
No, absolutely. You know, if you have a bid process and people bid, and the lowest bid is a company that bid at $12 million less, and it was a blind bid, that should be the company that gets the contract. I don't understand the dispute. If you have a company who originally said they couldn't perform, but then ended up performing for several months without pay, hiring local people who demonstrate not only they can perform, but they picked up twice a week as they said they would do, I don't understand the conflict. And so now we're confronted with many individuals who will not be able to take their garbage to these designated places, some being seniors, opening the door for the state to begin to fine the city upwards of $25,000 a day for public health nuisance. I don't understand the conflict. People are playing in the shadows and not with clear transparency, because at the end of the day, the role of city officials is to make sure the garbage get picked up, fires are put out, streets are paved, and people feel safe.
There are a lot of folks with questions. Tevin and I are going to rotate, but I ask this: please allow for your comments to be at the minimum, because there's a lot of folks, and a lot of folks got upset with me last time. So we're going to get to everybody this time. So we're going to go to Tevin and then me.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to push back a little bit on what you guys were just talking about, that Richards had the lowest bid. They did not. The city council persons who saw everything voted Richards down, and the mayor pushed it out anyway. And even when it went all the way up, they said that the mayor was wrong. He wants to give it back to them again. Richards needs to be taken off the table and put the bids back out again for other folks, because they were voted down. And that's rule of law. He's the executive, they are the legislative. He don't get to write the checks. No, You have to listen. They weren't the lowest bid. They were the lowest bid for twice a week with a cart. Twice a week with a cart. How many of the senior citizens that can't get their garbage to the metro were going to be able to push that 96-gallon cart down to the street? It needs to be started over from the beginning. You can't spend the money as the executive. The legislative branch spends the money.
Good evening. Everything is to be done decent and in order. Everything we do or don't do has consequences, whether they're negative or good. We live in the capital city of Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. The city is to represent the whole state. Mississippi is the poorest state in the Union. Yet, we own our own land, we own our own houses. We have elected officials to represent us and make the best decisions to provide for the city. There is a problem. If you're not a part of the solution to solve the problem, then you need to step aside and allow someone else to make those decisions. Some things are not to be made at the last minute. The city's in a dire need and cannot wait. We need our elected officials to handle.
You have a question?
I'm gonna get to my question. To handle our business in a timely manner. If they cannot make these decisions, we as Jacksonians cannot accept excuses anymore. Since there is a major conflict between our elected officials and they cannot agree on anything, we need to know what our next step is to resolve that problem, to put in a solution that works. A lot of these issues could have been avoided if it was not waited to the last minute. If the city council was to elect someone to handle the garbage, that should have been done last year, not this year. So we just need our elected officials that we chose to represent us to handle our business. Then a lot of this could be avoided. The legislation would have never been brought in to make decisions for us if the people we chose was doing and held accountable for what we elected them to do.
Hello? Quick question. Is there a way to have an informal vote here to see if there's a majority regarding these issues on the points of view?
Well, you know, the goal of tonight is for the public to share in this meeting their opinions. And I think you'll probably be able to see from the questions where people are. And it's not to really say yeah or nay, but this is a public forum, and we'll go forward with that. The only thing I would ask is, you know, if you're reluctant to say who you are when you get up to talk, please just let us know who you are. Sometimes people will get up and say things but don't identify who they are, and that's not good for I think, a town hall meeting.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Ray Davis, and I live in this community. My issue is with our 1 cent money. We voted as a city of people for that 1 cent money to be allocated to fix our streets. How is it that the legislators can take that money and reallocate it without our vote?
That is unfortunate. So there was legislation several years ago to authorize the citizens of Jackson to do a referendum vote. Unfortunately, in the Senate, there was language put in there to create a special oversight board, giving the governor, lieutenant governors, the Chamber of Commerce, along with city, appointments to that board. During this legislative session, as retaliation against the city of Jackson because of the water crisis and the diversion of the money, they then adopted legislation yet to be signed by the governor to restrict the use of that money. That is a part of what we're going to be filing against, because we agree with you that should not be the case, nor should it have been the case that there was an oversight board to oversee the citizens of Jackson's tax money. No other city has that structure.
And the point that goes to that is the city nor that oversight body asked for a change. The legislature made the change themselves without consulting the city or the oversight body for the 1%, the 1 cent money. So again, it's doing things against the city without any consultation with the citizens who live in the city. And that's not how things should work. And it's those disparities and differences that we will highlight. And so we elect our officials, but the officials making those decisions don't live in the city of Jackson. And it's the Mississippi State Legislature, and a majority of them live outside the city. But that does not mean that decisions they make are right or just or fair. And that's why we take them to court when there's a difference. And in these instances, we think those differences merit going to court.
Good evening. My name is Martha Oliver. I'm a member of this community. My question, Mr. Johnson, is once the governor signs those 3 or 4 bills, will that cease and desist all actions until the court has made a decision?
Not automatically. What we will also file is a temporary restraining order to prevent the implementation of those laws as we go through the court.
My name is Margaret Thomas Brown, and I would just like to know about the infrastructure bill that's nationwide. How is Mississippi going to be fit into this? Who's going to allocate the money for the infrastructure in Mississippi to be done? We cannot trust our government to do what's right about Mississippi, because we've had so many issues with money being taken and put in other places where it's supposed to be allocated for the for the streets and the roads and the stuff and the bridges and the things, especially in the northern part of Mississippi. And even in the city of Jackson, we have potholes that's big enough to put us to fish out of. You can put a pole in and you'll catch a fish. But I just want to know, how is the money being allocated for the state, for the city of Jackson, for us to have some kind of better roads and better facilities to even have like infrastructure on our schools and things like need to be done. How is Mississippi going to be treated in that episode? And our senators, what do they do? Wicker and Sidney Hyde-Smith, how are they doing what they need to do for Mississippi and for Jackson? And especially what they do, they part with the Republicans. And they forget about us. They don't think anything about the citizens in the state of Mississippi. They do what the party said. I can understand them wanting to go to their cocktail parties and decide where they want to go. But when it comes to legislating and taking care of the state of Mississippi, we don't have anything that we can look forward to them to do. They don't have any kind of town meetings when they come. So we just have to go by what they do, and every time we do, we always get the short end of the stick. And I just wanted to make sure that we gonna get something done in this state, and especially in Jackson with this infrastructure. And that's my.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your comments. The normal flow of transportation dollars flow through the state, either through State Department of Transportation, or in Mississippi, you got a combination hybrid with the Mississippi Department of Transportation and your highway commissioners. The problem is when you look at the historic expenditure of those federal dollars, a majority of that money has gone to the east side of Interstate 55 and not to the west side of Interstate 55. When Commissioner Simmons was elected the Central District Commissioner, I asked him for the numbers, and it was clear as night and day that the monies would come, but when the decisions were made to how they would be spent, it was always on the east side of Interstate 55. And because of that reason, 2 years ago, I filed a discrimination complaint against the state of Mississippi and how their transportation dollars have been spent. And so that complaint is working its way through the system. We've had a number of hearings on it, and we expect some kind of decision soon. In terms of the current infrastructure and transportation monies that we've approved, Senator Wicker is the only person in the Senate that voted for it. Cindy Hyde-Smith did not. I'm the only person in the House who voted for it. Nobody else voted for it. But what we have to do is all of us have to monitor how these monies are spent. There are certain requirements, the Justice 40 initiative, President Biden's equity and inclusion executive order is part of how we make sure that the money is spent properly. I don't have the assurance that when this money comes, the state of Mississippi is going to do the right thing, because there's no history of them doing the right thing, and that's why we have to monitor it. All the money that's the surplus in the budget right now is because the federal government sent COVID relief dollars, ARPA money, and other things to the state of Mississippi, and then they're turning around and acting like they had the money all the time, and criticizing the Biden administration and other folk who sent the money. And so, you know, I have a bad taste in my mouth because a lot of the communities that I represent are being overlooked, and I'm the only person who voted to send the money here. So we're looking at other options on how we can get the money spent. But the best thing I can encourage people here is all those monies, the decisions have to be made publicly. You need to find out when those agencies exist. In this area is something called the Metropolitan Transportation Planning Council. There are more people in the city of Jackson on that council, but they need to go to meeting. You know what I'm saying? And they need to put in the request that Jackson needs help. A lot of the money you see spent in Madison and Rankin County is determined by that body. The money comes based on population. But if you eat the lunch and sleep through the rest of the meeting, shame on you. And some of you know what I'm saying, because I've been fussing about this for a long time. Put good people on boards who will be an advocate for your community. Just like Madison and Rankin County have strong advocates for their parts of the money, and that's why when you see roads being built in the suburbs and nobody even live on them. But now, if you build it over time, they will come. But we need the same kind of enthusiasm for people who serve on the boards for Jackson and Hinds County. And in many instances, we don't have that.
I want to take a quick temperature check. How many people have questions? So that's a lot of people. I want y'all to be respectful of that as you make your remarks.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Tony Smith. You know, I happen to think outside the box. For years ago, Jackson had their own sanitation system before we privatized. And the solution to me is that invest in ourselves. Deprivatize it. Invest your money back into Jackson. You think of the commercial businesses that have to pay money for their trash, and we have control of the revenue, and we don't have to put it out for a third party to take business. You're investing into yourselves. This is a possible solution. Enter into a one-year contract with anybody who's going to take of it and to give us an opportunity to build a new sanitation department.
Good evening. My name is Maggie Cotton. I have a concern since they're going back and forth about who's going to pick up garbage. Would there be a continued charge on our water bill? Because that is one of the service charges on our water bill. Now, we know about the water. It's not safe, but you're getting $1,200 bills that you're not using the water. You can't use it. It's unsafe. So there's two folds. The water that you're getting charged for and the garbage that is not being picked up, that you're going to have that charge on your water bill.
Yes, my name is C.J. Bolton, and I was in a meeting Tuesday in regard to this same dialogue. And I believe that from what was explained or expressed to us, but there's a mismanagement in our resources downtown. They tell us that we have a hired attorney for the city council, when we have at least 10 lawyers on staff with the city. $300 and some an hour to legislate or to litigate for garbage that should be picked up already. My concern is we as citizens of Jackson should be closely monitoring the desires and the functions of our representatives, because I don't believe that they are managing the city's money that belongs to us fairly and properly.
I did ask one question. I appreciate the conversation about the garbage, but does anybody have a question about the water, Title VI, the omnibus bill, $600 million? Who has those questions? Well, I'm going to go to Tevin first. At the bottom.
Most importantly, the attacks on Jackson, Mississippi. I stood today to say not only should we demand respect from our elected officials, but anybody that comes into the city of Jackson to do business, because I think that folks have been emboldened to feel as if they can come here and do whatever they want to do and it's okay, right? And it has probably gone on for a long time, but I think the buck stops here. Right now we are dealing with issues of still residents not having clean water, not receiving board water notices. And by the way, Mr. Hennepin, I'm Danielle Holmes, co-founder of the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. And so that's problematic. The residents are drinking water. I just got a call today in North Point subdivision of an individual whose water is brown and it smells like sewer, and they didn't know, and their children have been ingesting it, and just so happened the mother happened to turn on the water and see this. It's a problem that we're not getting boil water notices. Even when we were having water issues, we were getting boil water notices. And so we really, really need that. We also need the community meetings that is supposed to happen with Jackson Water, as in the order with EPA, whatever the commitments. We need that. We need the coalition itself, as you have stood and said that you partner with us, Mississippi Rapid Response. We need to hear from you. We don't want to air out any, we can do it, but we want to talk. We really need to talk as a community. So thank you. And we definitely need to put boil water notices out.
So they don't put boil water notices?
Well, I guess we can get that answered real quick on the boil water notices.
We still issue boil water notices whenever there's been a break in a pipe, and it isolated typically around houses. We're not issuing citywide ones at the moment because we actually are putting clean water into the system from our treatment plants. They've been working very well over the last several months. Since after the disaster in January or over Christmas, we've recovered. We've got a contract operator running both plants. They've brought a lot of professionals in. They also hired almost 30 of existing city employees, brought them the training, the experience they need to operate those plants successfully. I think it's a success story so far, and I'm sure we're still, as the congressman pointed out, it's taken a long time to get here. We aren't going to have it perfect for a while, but frankly, it's amazingly better today than it was due to a number of things we have found over the last 2 months. Valves closed throughout the system. Sounds really simple. We've opened 41 major valves that were closed. The pressure is better in the system from my reports from just about any time it's been in a long time. Any South Jackson residents here that can attest to better pressure over the last couple months? She was asking about boil water notices in the drinking water, and again, we only issue those now when there's a break and a notice that we know we've had a disinfection problem. We haven't had any citywide. There still is brown water in the system, no doubt. A lot of that's due to the small diameter pipes. There's 109 miles of streets with less than 4-inch or 4-inch and less diameter pipes. Most of those are 2-inch galvanized. They produce brown water often. It still meets safe standards to drink. I'm not saying that I'm recommending anyone drink water that looks terrible when it comes out their tap. But we are going to address those pipes, but it's going to take a while. But we've got a lot of work to do. As far as the community meetings, we have several that are going to be scheduled in the next couple months. Again, we ran into some scheduling issues, and I'm willing to talk to anybody anytime. I've been to every meeting. Anybody's invited me. Anyone wants to come talk to me. I think I've been as accessible as possible. We've got a great plan going forward. Luckily, to the $600 million, it's actually possible, but I'm glad we're here in New Hope because I think there is new hope for Jackson Water. I'm working harder than I ever had. And the system is much better than I would have ever expected, and we haven't even spent any of the $600 million yet. So there is great hope, and we're on our way, and I apologize that we haven't spoken to Rapid Response Coalition, but I'm willing to anytime. Again, we're racing to make progress, and I can't imagine working any harder or any faster with the small group of people we have and the dedicated contractors we're working with, and the former city employees that were the heroes that really kept this thing together that are now working for Jacobs, and they're really pleased with their jobs, and they're being paid well, and they're being resourced well. So the progress will continue.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Congressman Thompson and everyone for convening this town hall meeting. My name is Ramona Taylor Williams. I live in the city of Jackson, and this is kind of indirect with the water issue, rooting to what caused the system to collapse this time, which was flooding. And flooding is a major issue in the city of Jackson. So climate change is so real, and I would like to see the city. We know the state is not going to do it because the governor, he said in a press conference that climate change was a political talking point. That is ludicrous. We're seeing and we're witnessing the impacts of climate change more and more and more every day, whether from flooding, whether from tornadoes, and we must get our communities adaptable, and we must get them resilient to this tragedy that we are facing. How can we utilize the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, to address the issues of flooding in our communities? My street has water that sits on it for weeks and weeks after it floods. We got major problems here in Jackson around climate change.
Well, the goal of the infrastructure and transportation money is local planning and implementation. So if there are priorities in that area, it's your city leaders that have to develop the plan and submit them for funding. And so that's a local issue that I would encourage you here to begin to engage your city leaders in terms of the money. And just because of the money, let me say that the Biden administration in the last 2+ years have put more dollars in communities to make a difference than I've ever seen before. So it's communities like Jackson that need to take advantage of that money. I can only say if you don't, somebody else will spend your money. And if you don't submit an application for the funds, somebody else will spend your money. And that's just how it goes. And, you know, I'm sure there's some people out here who hope Jackson does not submit plans because they want for their communities. But I encourage the leadership to submit plans. Otherwise, you will not get the funding necessary to stop flooding and address some of the other infrastructure needs in the community.
And I do want to recognize, I see two city council persons here. Angelique Leak, if you would stand up and let's give her a hand, city councilwoman. And Brian Gazelle, give him a hand. Are there any other city council persons here? Thank you.
And I just wanted to say quickly, just to add what Congressman Thompson just said, to your point, Ramona, that we definitely have to make sure that we're developing these local community plans and working with our council people like Councilman Griselle and Councilperson Lee to make sure that we have these plans in our neighborhoods that then are submitted to the city to get this funding through the federal government. And so that means that we have to have these local plans. We can't sit back and wait for the local plans to find us. We have to work through our neighborhood associations and develop the plans ourselves and take them to our council people and then apply for the funding, y'all. So that means we have to put some work in.
We can't hear.
My name is Pauline Rogers. I'm formerly incarcerated. I do reentry housing, the longest serving provider of reentry in the state with 36 years of zero recidivism. Yes, there is new hope. I met Dr. Jerry Young, not in New Hope, but I met Dr. Jerry Young in prison when he was the first African American person of the cloth, clergy, preacher, to grace the prison. My point is, in prisons, they don't get boiled water notices. They get no notices about water anyway, any kind of way. My question would be, how can we change that? The other part to that is, how can, if that notice ever goes out, how can they get clean water and use it? They don't have the option of boiling water. They can't even heat it up. They don't get an option of using an optional shower. And in the prison, they are coming out in record numbers with H. pylori, bladder cancer, with tumors on them as large as these lights put together, the little black heads there. The question would be, how can, and then right now in the tornadoes in Rolling Fork, there are 2 members in prison, incarcerated, that out of the 21 people that are deceased have lost their whole family, 7 people. So we are in the process of raising money to bury those 7 people and get those 2 family members by way of paying 4 police officers to escort them to the funeral in Rolling Fork. But the question would be, those federal dollars that are coming, that have already come to the state, is there an implementation plan that will make sure or ensure that the incarcerated population are covered? They are taken out of the prison when boiled water notices are issued in Jackson and surrounding areas, but they can't take those same cases of water that they're helping load cars with back to the prison and drink it for themselves. How can we change that?
Y'all have suffered mightily in Jackson, and it's become almost normal for you to think that boil water notices and water outages are the way of life. I'm telling you, it is not. You are unique in the United States. And I'm also here to tell you, I think it's already in our back rearview mirror at this point. Just the little bit of work we've done to this point, and with the promise of the rest of our plan going forward that's being funded by these dollars, I don't think you'll see an outage like we've had. The pressure problems will largely be fixed before the end of the summer. We'll know exactly what we need to do. Just opening the valves has solved that. So the citywide boil water notices as a result of low pressure citywide, very unusual in the United States. I'm betting right now on my word that we've solved it. Short of a major hurricane or some other natural disaster, we have figured out, when I say 41 major valves closed, that's hard to imagine. When you talk to water professionals who operate other systems, they're shocked that we had that much closed water valves in the system. The system couldn't get the water where it needed to go. It's not how it should have been. We've got that little piece taken care of. A lot more is coming. The water is clean when it leaves the plant, and it's going to be clean from this point forward getting to your homes. And we'll work on testing to prove that and get folks tests to make that happen. But at the end of the day, I'm very bullish. I've got a lot of hope for Jackson. You should have never have put up with the fact you didn't have water pressure at all and you had these numerous citywide boil water notices. Just is not normal, and I think we've already come past that. So I'm betting on it being in our rearview mirror. I'm doing everything possible to make sure it stays there, and we'll make the right investments with the generous funding we've got to make that happen.
Yeah, to answer, to go directly, the prisons are not in Jackson. It's a state of Mississippi problem. So we're talking about the city of Jackson water system, not what's taking place at East Mississippi Correctional Facility, which is in Rankin County, responsibility of the state, or Parchman, which is in Sunflower County. We're talking about the city of Jackson water system. So that does answer her question.
My name is Ruth Davis. I'm a citizen of Jackson, and I live in this community too. I'm asking the question, we wait till we have I would say a disaster before we start trying to do anything. They've been allocating these funds other places for Jackson for years. Why have our elected officials not known that? When they had the oil spill, they sent money all over the state of Mississippi, but Jackson got $50,000 for a bridge in the funding district. That's not fair. Madison County got a lot of money. Rankin County got a lot of money. Why we didn't get any? I hear nobody hollering about it. I hear nobody hollering about it when they redirect our money somewhere else and don't get to us. All I hear about is blaming the mayor. Blaming the mayor. The mayor wasn't here when this stuff started. He probably wasn't even born when half of it started. But the thing of it is, but everybody want to blame the mayor and make the mayor fix everything. He can't fix something with nothing.
We're going to take our last two questions, and then we're going to ask the panel to close it out.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jimmy Sandifer. I'm a realtor and CPA here in Jackson. And one of the most important things that Jackson need to do is have an internal audit. They need segregation of function, they need internal controls, and then they need a system where people that make decisions are independent of the people who actually do the contracting. That's why you get favoritism in contracting, because one guy that's innocent bid what it takes to do the job, someone else on the other side of town bid half as much what it's going to do the job, and what you wind up with, the money's gone and the job still hasn't been completed. But if you got segregation of function, you got a flow chart of where stuff should go, what department should do this, what department to do this, and the same thing with hiring. I guarantee you, when you can follow the dollar, you can put a manager with the activity, I promise you, the citizens of Jackson will be better served. Thank you.
Again, I'm Deborah Ray Davis. What I would like to know, is there any way that we, the citizens of Jackson who actually live in Jackson, can congregate as a large group to let the legislators know that we are not just sitting on our hands and letting them do whatever they want to do to Jackson? We need to be in large numbers, congregate in large numbers to let them know that we are not taking what they're trying to do to Jackson. We refuse to do it.
Okay. So before we close out the title meeting, I do want to recognize the mayor who was at a neighborhood association meeting. Mayor, you want to have a few closing brief words?
Good evening. Sorry. One more time. Good evening. First, I want to extend my apologies that I could not be here sooner. Just within the last hour and a half, this is my third event within the last hour and a half, and so I tried to make it as quickly as I could. Hopefully, I'm not off base with what I'm responding to, because I haven't been here to hear your comments and what was burning on your minds. I think that to the last question, that's exactly what we must do, right? But that doesn't only come from your leadership, right? That comes from you, right? That comes from how you organize and how you make it a part of our culture, that we don't wait for things to happen, that if you lead us, we expect answers and response. I think that sometimes what happens is when we have a challenge, we're reactionary. We get out there and we're trying to put together a strategy. We're trying to put together how we defend one another. And we're not in unity in moments of peace. You prepare for war in time of peace, right? That's when you prepare for war. And so let's take that as a lesson and let's build on that. There are a number of organizations that have meetings about issues that you're going to be facing. The problem is that we have to be better at showing up, right, at those meetings at that time and make sure that we're preparing. To the sister's comment that I just heard, yeah, you know, so I have certainly over the course of different people, you know, and campaigning, critiques of what people did in the past happen. But I do have to give credit that there have been leaders before me, other mayors, that have talked about this issue, and the city of Jackson has consistently been denied the resources that we deserve, right? And there are a few things that people don't immediately identify. The fact that we got $800 million, and thank you, Congressman, thank you, everyone. Please give them a round of applause. NAACP, everybody who has been working to make that happen. That is historic. That has never happened in Jackson's history. In fact, the action that they took has never happened in any city's history, right? By comparison, Flint, Michigan got $100 million, right? Just so you know how large that was. But the other thing that they did, and I think that I don't want this to be missed, is that they found a way for it to come directly to Jackson, right? The other thing that they did was they found a way that instead of the state, because typically when there's issues with a water system, the Department of Health or somebody takes over your system and tries to run it. And so they found a way that we could have a third-party administrator instead of the state taking it over. And so sometimes you got to look at what ain't being said, right? Why would they skip over the state? Why would they find a way for someone else to be in control over the state, than the state? And that's because it is exactly what President Biden told me, right? And he said, I don't like the way I see the state treating your city, right? And we're going to find a way to resolve that. Now, we can spend a lot of time reflecting on who's responsible for the problem, right? But I think while we can do that, our time would be better served talking about who's responsible for fixing it, right? And so we're responsible for fixing it now. And so in that process, we have to have more meetings like this so that we make sure that one, we're accountable to the dollars, that it serves us best, that we end up with a system that is dependable, that is reliable, and is equitable, right? Because there are parts of our city that we well know are affected worse than other parts of our city. And so in order to do that, it is going to require some expertise. It is going to require that we report, as the brother broke down, a process of transparency, not objectionable to that, right? But it's also going to require that you be involved in that process, that you inform us and that you speak out, that you talk about your issues, that you talk about your concerns, and you talk about your vision for this system, right? And so that's where we have to be going forward. If there are, I don't know if there are any questions. Was that brief?
That's it. No,
all right. I mean,
So I want to thank the mayor for coming out. I see your hand up. We've been here an hour and a half. We said it was going to be an hour.
She wanted to talk about garbage. I will talk to y'all on the side about garbage because that certainly ain't brief, right? So I will talk.
So the first time we came together at Nebo, we talked about solution, resulting in the Title VI complaint being filed against the state of Mississippi. The second time we came together with a town hall meeting, we met here, we talked about the next steps, and it resulted in the $600 million allocation. We're coming here tonight to give an update on those two things, but also the next step as a result of the state of Mississippi targeting the city of Jackson, which will result in us filing a lawsuit the day the governor signed those bills. It is really important for us when we come together, we talk solutions as we have easy for us to identify problems. And I would charge all of us who live in the city of Jackson to hold our elected officials accountable, because if they fall into the space of pointing fingers at somebody else, particularly those who've been in office for multiple terms, the question is, what have you done while you have been in office? So it is our goal to look forward with excellence as we strive to make the city of Jackson the city it should be in light of the state we live in. And the state we live in is a political climate where individuals will use the city of Jackson as the punching bag to get reelected. The state we live in is a political climate where othering or race have been used and weaponized in a way in which is not helpful for the growth of not only the city, but this state. The state we live in is one in which we have put people in office who come from our community who are not accountable to our community. And so as the Congressman and I, we continue to have these town hall meetings, it is looking towards solutions. Because the power we need is the power that's in this room, and I thank all of you for continuing to lend your power to create the city, the society we need it to be.
Well, Derek's absolutely right. The only thing I'd add is, you know, we're still the largest city in the state, but our votes don't reflect that. If we are not exercising our right to vote at every election, outside forces will look at that and say, well, they don't really care because they don't vote. So I encourage us to look at who's voting and who's not voting, and let's make that process at every opportunity work. We pick our leaders in America at the ballot box. If we don't exercise that right, people will not just take over your police department, your water department, your airport. They'll take over everything. But if you push back at the ballot box every time and put good people there who will fight for this community, we'll make it. But I encourage you, we absolutely have to stress it. And I encourage you. And the one equalizer in America is the right to vote. A billionaire and a homeless person on election day, their vote counts the same. And so if we do it the right way, people will pay attention to us. And I encourage this community to start elevating voter registration and participation, along with educating people as to who's running for office. It's important that you do that. Invite the people running for office to your community. Ask them the tough questions when they're running. Don't just let them say, I'm going to do for everybody. Well, okay, but you're in my neighborhood. What you going to do for my neighborhood? That's what you need to ask. So this is an election year. We pick everybody from governor to, I'll say constable or justice court judge. So from top to bottom, invite those individuals who are running for office to your neighborhood. And if they choose not to come, then they tell you they're not interested in you voting for them. And do it that way. So that's how we, over the long haul, that's how we win. People will pay attention to the numbers. So again, Dr. Young and the New Hope family, thank you all so much for allowing us to come. Thank you so much, NAACP. I want to introduce John Brown to you, not the Constable John Brown, but the Red Cross John Brown. Stand up, Brother Brown. This gentleman is responsible for the Red Cross disaster response for the tornadoes. He is the, I won't say that, but he in charge. So some of you know what I was about to say, but I didn't. But you know, and so he's been wonderful. Every time we've raised an issue about the delivery of services or the inequity of the delivery of services, he's handled it. And so I thank him personally for that. And we had some moments. Catch me after, I'll tell you, but he dealt with all of them. And I thank you, Brother Brown, for that. I thank all the other people who've come out. And that's all I got.
Thank you.
Did Pastor Young? He's all ready. So, Mr. Chairman, you gonna dismiss us with a? Oh, okay. All right.
I'm sorry, just really quickly, just to respond to the lady who wanted more information about large gatherings and where we can get together. Wanted to encourage folks to follow all of our coalitions. We have the Jackson People's Assembly. Please follow us on Facebook, Jackson Undivided. And of course, I have to ask you to join our Jackson NAACP in our Mississippi State Conference. So please follow us at those networks, and we'll be posting those meetings on those networks, Jackson People's Assembly and Jackson Undivided. Thank you. And Working Together Jackson.
Good evening again. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank Congressman Bennett G. Thompson. Let's give him a round of applause. President Derek Johnson, Bray Connor, and our branch president, Nashawn B. Lambright Haynes. And so on behalf of our state president who's here with us, Reverend Robert James, just want to thank y'all for coming out. You know, this is an incredible issue to talk about. We will be discussing this issue again. And the thing that I am most proud about, as Derek mentioned, when we come to you, hopefully we'll have more solutions. And those solutions are ones that you all are a part of. So thank you for being here. And just want to thank New Hope and Pastor Young once again for having us. You know, everyone have a good night. Thank you.